Hello, welcome to this demonstration of Feezily's JSON API access capabilities. This is typically not used by standalone advisor businesses or mortgage businesses. However, if you run a revenue solution service for multiple finance advice or mortgage broker businesses, then you want to automate as much of that process as you can. And this is where the API access of Feezily can really be a great advantage. It can also mean that you don't have to expose your users to any of the Feezily user interface. As far as they're concerned, they're just using your service alone. They can even upload to your service, provided that you've provided file upload facilities in your app. You can then get those files, send them to Feezily for conversion, get the converted data, and then store it in your database and do whatever you want with that data. You're basically just using Feezily as a data transformation service. And let's face it, no one wants to write that sort of stuff on your own. Well, you can, but it'll cost a lot of money, and if you're not amortizing that cost over lots of different clients, then the cost far outweighs the benefit. So you may as well just use a service like Feezily that has all that right out of the box and supports many file formats right from day one. So you can go to market straight away with a product that's just going to work for so many file formats. So let's have a look at the very simple JSON API. Now, as you may be aware, Feezily is actually written on the FileGroove platform. Now, FileGroove is a data transformation and orchestration platform, and it's generic. It's got nothing to do specifically with the finance industry or mortgage industry or any industry at all. It can just do generic data transformations of any type to any other type. What Feezily is a specialization app that sits on the top of FileGroove, and it's specialized for the finance market. Right, so you will see that these APIs are going to be hitting something called FileGroove, which is a baseline financial services specialization that actually sits under Feezily. So there's a few layers going on here, but as developers, I'm sure you'll understand what's going on there. What you will understand, if I'm very easy to understand, is that there are just three very simple API calls that you make when you want to do a transformation. Now you might say, why isn't there just one? Well, we want to make sure that we give you a response immediately. So we have non-blocking API calls. So anytime you make an API call, you should get a response back basically as soon as that data that you've sent in the request has been received and processed. When I say processed, I mean just read. It doesn't mean that the whole file has been processed, because in some scenarios, people can send files that are megabytes or even gigabytes long. So you're not going to get an instant transformation and response. But you will get an instant response. And the response will say, thank you, I've got your request. Here's your process ID. Check back at regular intervals to see how we're going with it. So the first call of the API is called initiate transformation process. The second call retrieves the status of that process, and only when you receive a status that says completed will you proceed to actually retrieve the payload using the retrieve payload API call. So that's why it's broken into three separate calls. It means you can provide feedback to your clients who may be waiting on a transformation with progress and status. It also means that you can handle errors. Sometimes there are binding errors that occur. In other words, we may get a file through that's got a new advisor that we haven't yet experienced before. And rather than just blindly create the new advisor, Feezily will make a suggestion for the creation of a new advisor based on their name, but it will not do it without approval. So for that reason, we need some user to approve that change. So they must go to the user interface and approve the addition of a new advisor. And then the process will continue to completion or until there's another rectifiable issue with that process. Could be multiple advisors. But once the issues are resolved, the single process that you started will work through till completion. Once you've got that completion status, you then retrieve the payload. So let's have a look. This request we're looking at now is the JSON for the initiate request. We've actually got the file that the data for the file that we want to have converted stored in the request. So it's being sent in the request. It's basically a base 64 encoding of the file. So straight up, nice and easy. We haven't tried to break the actual file into individual JSON elements because that would just explode its size and take a lot longer to send across the internet and take a lot longer parsing. Take a lot longer producing at the request end and parsing at the receiving end. So basically we do a base 64 encoding. We expect a base 64 encoding via the client. And we expand that out on the server end, and we start the translation process. Part of the request is the product provider code. So each product provider has a code and the format that the file you're providing is in. So in this case, we've got Colonial First State, and it's their core format. We also require a service provider ID. That's an ID that represents you as an organization. You must be registered, obviously, on the system. And we also have a authorization header that must be completed so that you can proceed. It's token based, so once you've done the initial authorization, you just need to present the token with each request rather than re-authenticating each time. We also pass in to the request the file name, the original file name that your user submitted, and that's basically so that in any process logs or anything we can see that file name and we can see straight away what it was, because obviously looking at the base 64 encoding isn't going to tell you much about the contents as a human reads it. So after we've sent that request, we can then send status requests to see how it went. Part of the response to that initial request will be the process ID. And then we can send a retrieve transformation process status. As you can see, there's an array here. So maybe you've got 3 or 4 processes that you've sent off. You can check the status of all of them within a single request. So we're actually going to go through and send that. We actually sent that initial request some time ago, but it's still in the system, so we can send a status request on that. And as we can see, it's got the process ID and the status is completed. There's no need for any details or user action because everything's completed. If there was a binding issue, like I mentioned earlier, then there would be details explaining the binding issue and a code that represents the user action that's required. And then finally, because we know this is completed, we can now do a payload request, which will return the translated data in the format that is specified for your client, for your particular business in the FileGroove system. So let's say you need your data to be produced in Excel format. We will customize your setup so that every time you do a transformation, the particular Excel format that you require will be used to present the data to you. If you need it in a CSV format, we'll do that too. If you need it in XML, So basically, as part of your onboarding process, you give us a sample of the data format that you require the output data in, and we, as part of the service, there's no extra cost for this, we will produce a generator that will generate the data in the format you require. We've obviously got some generic tools we use for doing all that, so that's not a big job for us. But given it's a once-off operation for you, rather than expose you to that and having you do that extra work in doing the mapping to that output file, we offer to do that for free, and it's all nice and quickly done. It doesn't involve a learning curve for you. You don't have to learn our tool for doing that output generation. So everything's much quicker and saves you guys money. So let's send that request through for the payload. And it thinks it hasn't had that, has not yet had its status requested via the status request endpoint. 6941. Well, let's do that. 6941. Send. There we go. I hadn't actually sent the status request, hence we it's one of the things it does. It will not let you just keep trying to poll to get the payload. No, you must do things the right way. You must poll the status, and only when you've got a completed status will you be able to successfully poll, send a request to get the transform data. And here's the transform data. Once again, we send it back to you in base 64 encoded format. We also have some metadata that we send back. So in this case, it's the total commission. So commissions are calculated, added up, and some file formats that you have may not actually store that total in there. So we have extra metadata so you can get the totals without actually running through and calculating it yourself. So it's just a convenience. We can also add other metadata as required, but that normally is sufficient for most people. Okay, we also have a document generated by Postman which goes into great details about the different endpoints that you can call in the API. So hopefully you've seen how simple it is to interact and integrate your application with the FileGroove Feezily data transformation capabilities. If you have any questions, please contact us via the contact us form or give us a call. Yeah, we're really bending over backwards to help CRM providers, platform providers to basically leverage our technology to get their technology up to a higher level of reliability for data transformation. And also, if it's a new product, get it to market much, much quicker than if they had to go and build transformation tech on their own. All right, thank you for listening.